Good day and welcome to this DPI program. I'm your host, Paul McAdam. With me is the Prime Minister and Leader of Government Business in the National Assembly, the Honorable Prime Minister Moses Nagamootoo. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you.
Today I want to take a look at issues which will include governance, parliamentary affairs, information, and domestic affairs in general. These are some of the issues that you have a broad portfolio and you cover. I just want to take a look at some of the issues which are currently gaining the public's attention. And first off, we want to deal with parliamentary affairs. We deal with the legislation, for example. We just had a sitting of Parliament. You introduced a very important bill which would see Guyana moving towards constitutional reform. It's first reading. What does this mean for Guyanese in general?
Constitutional reform is a very important exercise of the rights of the people to change the law under which the country is governed. And we had made a campaign promise that we would look at the Constitution and support a process whereby we could change some of the articles of the Constitution that would perhaps bring about better governance in Guyana, greater inclusivity. That's what we said. We want more of the people of this country, of the social, political, and other forces to be involved in the process of governance. So taking this measure to have the first reading of the constitutional reform consultative bill was for me a very important and historic step. It is now going to be, as I did, send it to the Parliamentary Committee on Constitutional Reform. The Constitution itself provides that there should be a body in the Parliament that should look from time to time whether the Constitution should be reviewed. And this body is what you call a bipartisan body. It represents the parties in the National Assembly. And I believe that you cannot start the process of constitutional reform unless you have the broadest possible support for it, because some of the changes that you are going to be making would require, yes, a simple majority. Others will require 2/3 majority, and perhaps we don't know. We may have to go to a referendum to change some other aspects of the Constitution. But basically, this, for me, is this beginning of the fulfillment of a promise to the people of our country.
Now, you are someone with decades of experience in terms of information and telecommunication, basically. We have an amendment to the Broadcast Act. What does this mean? It's been read, but for the ordinary person, what does it mean in terms of communication and what information they are able to now get and how they get it?
We all grew up looking at movies about the Wild West. And I was recalling a period in the 1990s, early in 1992, where an expert in broadcasting came to Guyana and looked at the broadcasting television landscape and said Guyana was a Wild West, that there are no laws, there are no regulations that effectively govern the broadcasting landscape. There were people who came and squat on what is called the spectrum, which is they took a frequency and they start broadcasting. People just slung a camera on the shoulder, and they overnight became television stars. And so the content of broadcasting, the legal basis and standard of broadcasting had never been tackled comprehensively. When I was in a previous administration, I did, I think, 4 drafts of a broadcasting act. Eventually, we did have a broadcasting act, but there it was deficient from the point of view that it didn't spell out what was expected of people who operate radio and television frequencies or stations. There was literally a one-word regulation that was passed in 2014, I believe, that says you shall pay a fee for the right to broadcast, and which was very shameful, that is all you could require of a broadcaster, to pay a fee, and not whether the broadcaster should confine himself or herself to certain standards of good broadcasting, healthy content, educational, entertaining, and also to ensure that you do not broadcast hate speeches, appeals to racism, and the kind of ethnic divisions that we had experienced in this country, the worst types several decades ago, or to advocate acts of terrorism. So we believe that you had to have a relevant and contemporaneous law that would address some of these issues. And I feel that the amendment to the Broadcasting Act was basically to introduce regulations. And the regulations were done in keeping with the law. The Guyana National Broadcasting Authority suggested the areas and work on the regulations in consultation with the National Frequency Management Unit. And so originally the suggestions to regulate broadcasting in Guyana didn't originate as such from the government of Guyana or from the minister. It came out of the authority that was established to regulate broadcasting. Now, I just want to say this, Paul. We have petroleum resources under the sea. And when someone comes to explore and to extract oil from under the sea within our territorial jurisdiction, our territory, you provide a license. And the license carries certain conditions that would later or would be seen in an agreement where you have to pay royalty. You have to share the profit. So if it is not different if you give a license to someone to use what is above the land, which is called our electromagnetic spectrum, which is ours, which is the nation's resource. And it's limited. Not only should you be required to pay a fee, you should be able to give to the society what the society would expect of a broadcasting entity, either radio or television. And so you have a requirement that you can carry emergency notices, you could carry a broadcast by your president, the head of state, the commander-in-chief. You could carry alerts as to weather, storms, floods. People expect that anyone operating and using the permission granted by the state, by the people, giving the persons a license. A license is not transport. You don't own this forever. It is given to you for a certain limited time, and you have obligations. Like receiving a license to drive a motor car tells you that you must drive on the left-hand side of the road. The license doesn't allow you to drive on the right-hand side. What happens if you go on the right-hand side? So I believe that for every license, every permission to use a national asset, a national resource, it carries responsibilities. And that is why in these regulations you have a requirement for anyone who is licensed to operate a radio or television station must be able to allow within 1 hour, 1 hour within 24 hours, time that would be dedicated for the Guyanese people to be informed by the state or through the government and its relevant agencies of important issues of the day. It is not too much to ask a broadcaster to be able to do these things out of a national obligation.
Now, on that issue, the opposition leader has come out swinging with us, his reaction to this whole thing in terms of coming down on freedom of expression and speech and so on. How do you react to something like that?
I think the leader of the opposition is trying to gain attention, and he picks on every issue. Look, I've been an old hand in politics now, and I realize that you can't get relevance out of noises. In politics, all noise and no purpose is not an option. All noise and protest without unity is not an option. And so I am no longer surprised that the leader of the opposition would choose to pick on every issue and to find fault with every issue. When I sent the revised code of conduct for government ministers and parliamentarians for a comment from him, he went to the press and said it was crap. That was the word he used, the leader of the opposition. He didn't suggest any change to the code that I sent to him. And here is also the issue of broadcasting regulations. That I read him saying that this would be the end to freedom of the press in Guyana. No one should take him seriously. It's just a cacophony of noises. And because at no time in our country has the press been freer than it is today. There is no censorship. There is no attempt to shut down newspapers or throw out reporters for press conferences. There have been no use of withholding of ads to newspapers to strangle them economically. There have been no threats to invade printing presses and to bump off reporters and press people in a newspaper that could have been critical of a government. There are no more denunciations and what the Guyanese call the cuss down of reporters as vultures and carrion crows. So what is the leader of the opposition complaining about? Just hurriedly before he left, willy-nilly he gave the licenses to operate television and radio to his friends, to cronies, to relatives, to political associates. And basically, this gentleman has absolutely no credibility to be lecturing anyone, more so the government, as to the issue of press freedom. So I would not pay much attention to what he has said, and all I know is the time is ripe for the broadcasting landscape to be fully regulated. Of course, there would be need to change as we go along. Nothing is cast in stone, and I'm prepared still to receive and to look at any reasonable recommendations as to how broadcasting should be better looked after in Guyana.
Something you touched on briefly just now, the issue of governance. Government has indicated its intention to fight corruption, to increase transparency in all of its dealings. How do you see this process coming? And I always hear this is a work in progress, but I know a lot has been done, and you say a lot more has to be done, but how do you see this coming along, this process?
As you know, we have gazetted the Reform Code of Conduct to amend the Integrity Commission law. in Guyana, which I referred to just now, the response. There were many organizations that had sent recommendations, sent proposals on how we should have this code of conduct for government ministers, other members of parliament, and generally persons in public life. So I have since appeared before a committee of the National Assembly headed by the Speaker to answer certain questions about the reform code of conduct. The opposition had pressed for me to appear before this committee, and when I went last week, surprisingly, they didn't turn up. They boycotted the session so that they had an opportunity to say what they expect of the code of conduct.
And also question you too. And
to question me, to interrogate me. I went there not knowing what would be thrown at me, but I felt that it was a good exercise to sit with your colleagues in the National Assembly and to discuss something as important as a code of conduct for persons in public life. The code of conduct is not unique, it is not new, it is like what we read when we grew up and all the time, the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property. So if you're in public life, you consciously decided that you're entering politics or you're taking up a full-time job with the state or the government in a high executive position, then you should be required to assure the state, the government, and the people of the country that your hands would be clean.
And hold you to a higher standard.
And they must be able to hold you to a higher standard. So this code of conduct, there was a code of conduct, or there is a code of conduct in the existing law, but it needed to be reformed and reviewed and restructured. So it came, the restructured code of conduct came with what is called the Nolan principles, 10 higher standards, principles, like accountability, loyalty to the state, honesty, morality, conflict of interest, that if you were a minister or a member of parliament or some person in other higher office, you have to decide whether you should seek outside employment. And if you sought that outside employment, you're having two jobs, of course, you have to see if that constitutes a conflict of interest. The principle, for example, that would affect you from carrying out your primary function, which is a government function. The other aspect is bribes. A big aspect of it is bribes, has to do with bribes. You are allowed to accept a gift of a modest value. The old law has the value, and the new law is now saying, defining and saying that the gift you accept as a personal gift must come from your family, from your friend, or a symbolic gift, a painting, a ceremonial sword, sculptures, some artwork, some books. If you accept something, it doesn't say you must not accept a gift. We are all living in a world where we go to ceremonies and people, when I went to India, everywhere I went, someone throws a garland on my neck, they throw a shawl over my shoulder out of respect. They give some symbolic gifts representing their state, representing their country. Wherever I go, Guadeloupe, United States, wherever I go, people would offer some symbolic gifts. It is not saying you shouldn't accept a gift. It is you must not accept a gift in such a way as it compromises what you do, that it is given to you as an inducement, as a kind of a bribe to get something done for somebody or your family, or not to do something that you ought to do. And of course, we expanded gifts to also include invitations to concerts invitations to big sporting events, concerts, sporting events. Now, it doesn't mean you can't go if somebody sends you a ticket to attend cricket. No, you go to cricket, but it must not be lavish, expensive entertainment, and must not be something that you repeat very often, right? So that you have to be careful that the people you receive these lavish, expensive gifts and invitations from, they're not doing business with your government. They're not doing business with you if you were a minister, and they would not expect a favor from you. They're not compromising you. So the reform and to the integrity legislation is very important for Guyana. And of course, when I put it in the official gazette, it's going to come up in the National Assembly. It will kickstart the process to establish a new integrity commission where all persons in public life identified in a schedule, their designation is there, they will declare their assets. Now, people say, why is it that there was a law and there was a requirement for people to declare assets and their incomes before, and why do you need to do that again? Well, the long and short of that matter is that since 1999, there has been no integrity commission. There has been no chairperson of the integrity commission since, I believe, 2006, and when the previous chairman opted out of the position, so that there is no functional integrity commission. So you need to recompose it. And the president at this moment is looking into this issue of bringing back an integrity commission, so that you shouldn't have anyone out there in the public saying, hey boy, look at the person holding a government job, and look, overnight he got a big house, he got a couple of cars, he got 2 boats, he got, you know, this and that, and he's traveling every month overseas and so on. People must not be, in a society such as ours, must not be forced to come to conclusion or to have a perception that their leaders are corrupt.
Well, of course, this deals with the perception of
the perception, right, yes. Right. And look, we were 2 years ago, and just before that, we are just at the bottom of the perception, corruption ladder, till below that we had what you call pervasive corruption. Everybody felt that everyone in public office was involved in some level or levels of sleaze and corruption and theft and misuse of money. Yeah. So we are trying, Paul, to come out of that. And it is a conscious effort by a government. We may not get everything clean. We may not be able to get everything right. We may not be able to get everyone clean. But don't fault us for the attempt to change the way Guyana is perceived in the society at large and in the world.
All right, now time is running out. It is the time of emancipation, so I want to end on that note. Your thoughts on emancipation over the years, and we're celebrating some significant milestones, not only for, well, emancipation, but also indentureship. Want to share some of your thoughts on this? I know you mentioned it in the National Assembly, and I see you're dashiki, looking rather dashing. So,
well, you know, this is something it's a wear I like very much. Strange enough, many years ago, Alvin Kalicharan had brought me a dashiki. I didn't know it was a dashiki, but I wore it for many years. He brought it from Pakistan, and it's a very nice, colorful, proud attire, I should say so. Yes, we'll be observing another August 1st, which is Emancipation Day. And I'd like to take the opportunity to wish all Guyanese of African origin, African descent, happy emancipation. It is a very significant event in our national life. It is a national holiday. Our Constitution spoke to the indomitable will of our forefathers, our foremothers, our ancestors. The hardships they endured under slavery and the exploitation of their labor for free by those who had colonized us. These are things that you don't let pass by without a conscious reflection that there must have been an indomitable will on the part of our African foreparents who struggled against the evil of slavery, an inhumane system. And so all around you have the struggle of opposites, the struggle of good over evil. We see that as a symbol of our Diwali celebration or Pago celebration and so many other rituals that we do. It is always a celebration of good over evil. So Emancipation is a celebration of light over darkness. It's a celebration of struggle against evil. And slaves, as I said, I read somewhere, said they came out of slavery with scars on their heart and fury in their soul. Of course, we understand the scars, but the fury in their soul has been, how could you for centuries have in the world a system that would condemn people into human cargoes to exploit their labor for profits and for wealth? So it is also coinciding in Emancipation celebrations this year with the observance of 100 years since the abolition of indentureship. Indentureship was semi-slavery. Indentureship was another way of utilizing labor, in this case for cheap, for the purpose of grinding the mills of capitalism, grinding the mills of colonialism, of plantation life. And so we saw in our national anthem the words that both bondsmen and freed laid their bones on our shores. Yes, our African ancestors, our Indian ancestors, others, Chinese, Portuguese, even our indigenous people, they have made a conscious effort to convert this territory into their land, into their country, their motherland. And so when we celebrate Emancipation Day, we are also celebrating the resolve of our foreparents to bequeath to generations like us and future generations a country that is based on freedom, a country that is based on the ability to be proud that you own something. And so today we are Guyanese and we are proud of our Guyana, every inch of our 83,000 square miles, because of the sacrifices and the efforts of our ancestors. And so we must all say hats off to our African brothers and sisters, the descendants of African slaves, that they have made tremendous contributions, not only to lay the foundations for the modern economy of Guyana, but to be able to develop this country into a national way, sharing with all other ethnicities, all other Guyanese, in what will, we hope, and I'm confident it will be realized, a harmonious society, a society of Guyanese first, Guyanese second, Guyanese third, Guyanese forever. Happy Emancipation.
Thank you, sir. You're watching a DPI program. Your host, your story, Paul McAdam. We had a nice interview here with the Prime Minister, and sir, I want to thank you for your time, and happy Emancipation to you too.
Thank you.